That's Steve.
Hello, my name is Steve Gordon. Welcome to the ACM Education, SIG HPC Education Chapter uh, webinar. Today we have Akshay Dayan, who's going to talk to us about a parallel effort in the IEEE called TC-HPC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Akshay, and he'll tell you more about himself and about that organization and what they do.
All right, thank you, Steve. Thank you for inviting me to do this. Let me just share my screen and bring up my slides. All right, here we go. All right, thank you everyone for making time to join us for this presentation. As Steve mentioned, we do have a sister effort up, which is very similar to what you guys have been doing for a while, but it's fairly new under IEEE, and we thought this would be a good time for us to connect, share a little bit about what we do, and also hear a little bit about what your organization does, and maybe share a few resources that we've been able to put together over the course of the last year. Let me start by telling you a little bit about myself. I was an associate professor at Ursinus College, a small liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia, until 2017. While I was in the role as a faculty member, I was very involved with a couple of different initiatives at IEEE, in particular with the Technical Committee on Parallel Processing and the Technical Committee of High Performance Computing. IEEE is interesting because the TCs there mirror the SIGs at ACM, but they have a fair number of them that have a certain amount of overlap in their mission. So even though we are part of TC-HPC, TCPP is considered a member technical committee, and I'm going to share a little bit of what we've done under the auspices of TCPP also. Couple of things I've been involved with there are some of the workshops that these two technical committees host at various conferences. There's also a funding program for faculty members trying out new ideas in high performance computing that I'd like to share some information on. And I was able to take advantage of that as a faculty. And there also is some support for traveling to conferences to share your results. So I wanted to talk briefly about all of those things. Since 2017, I've taken on a different role, but I continue to be involved with TC-HPC. I currently work as the team lead in engineering for Bloomberg LP, and I actually manage a team that develops curriculum and delivers training to engineers at Bloomberg. So basically continuing around a similar mission with a slightly different audience. It's been interesting moving from academia to industry, and maybe make the move back at some point too, so you never know what life has in store. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Educational Outreach Initiative. Like I said, we're very young. We were founded in 2018. TC-HPC has existed for a little bit longer than that. But the way IEEE creates these initiatives, there were two created under TC-HPC in 2018, and we are one of them. I've shared our homepage here, but I wanted to briefly talk about our mission, and because I think it exemplifies the overlap that we have here. Excuse me, I'm just going to try to hide this pin. Okay, that's better. It's hiding a lot of my screen. So I just want to talk a little bit about our mission because it does overlap considerably with yours. So our mission was, when we were created, was to coordinate activities, information, and best practices around HPC education and outreach across our member community, our member committees and the broader community. So really, we are very focused around serving the educational community around high performance computing. And we tried to define some activities that we could take over there. And we were sort of thinking of the two audiences we can serve. We can serve the graduate student audience, and we can also serve the faculty audience within this area. So our activities, proposed activities when we were created, were four primary things we would try and do, which since then diverged a little bit, and I'll talk about that. But our original goal was to be involved at conferences which target student activities. So I'm thinking here about PhD forums, student mentoring, workshops, and things like that. We were hoping to develop a portal that integrates resources for people who are teaching high performance computing courses, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. We were also hoping, in general, just to collect available resources for faculty teaching these classes, because depending on the kind of institution you're at, you may or may not have the computing infrastructure you need, especially if you're trying to work with some of the newer technologies here. So one thing I'm hoping to do in this webinar is share with you a public resource that's available to request time if you're teaching a class that uses parallel and distributed computing. And finally, we are hoping eventually to start serving as a bridge between undergraduate programs and people in the industry or research labs, or even people at doctoral institutions hosting an REU, so that we can connect them to the students they're looking for in these positions. So that was our original mandate. This was all done before I was asked to lead this initiative, and this was all kind of what IEEE had put together and come to us with. So since we're fairly new, we decided to not tackle all 4 of these initiatives at the same time, but kind of work our way up incrementally. So initially, our focus has been very specific. We're looking at how do we help the graduate student community and the faculty community in the area of high-performance computing. And last year, we were able to do a little bit. What we did is we primarily focused our efforts around Supercomputing 18. We funded about 20 travel awards for the doctoral symposium there. So pretty much every graduate student who was accepted into the doctoral symposium was able to get a pretty sizable amount of funding from us to cover their travel expenses. We feel like that's a big way to help, because it allows students to attend conferences that they may not have full support for otherwise from the host institutions. We also organized, while we were there, a bird of feather session, which was a career panel. The idea here was to target the student audience at the conference and try to see if we can explore what kind of careers you can carry out in high performance computing, and just kind of broaden the avenue from only faculty positions, right? So we had a panel which had a couple of engineers from Facebook and Google. We had a few folks from higher ed institutions of various different kinds. So small liberal arts colleges, big state institutions, everything was covered. And then we also had some people from like the Texas Supercomputing Center. So just talking about research lab positions, to talk to this audience about what their careers look like in these fields and how they sort of fell into one of these positions and how they've evolved since then. It was pretty well attended. We had, for a typical BOF at SC, the numbers are around 20. We had close to 35, 40 people attending at various points. And we got some positive feedback about this panel. So that was primarily our activities last year. It was our first year of creation, and we felt like we did a reasonable amount for that time. What we're looking to do for this year, and that's kind of what I wanted to share with you, is to share our plans for what's coming up for the next 12 months or so, and also share some resources that we've been able to put together with TCPP. So first thing, Supercomputing 19 in Denver this year, we will be present there. Again, I know there's some work being done by your organization at that conference too, and I think this may be the best avenue for us to collaborate. What we're doing again is a mix of what we did last year and then some new programming. We're funding travel awards for doctoral showcase attendees. So if you are, or if you have students who are attending the doctoral showcase, they will hear from the organizers indicating that they can apply for a travel award that will be funded by us. We are again organizing a BOF. The BOF will have 2 events this time. There will be a career panel, but with a slightly different angle than last year. We're going to try to connect more closely with people who are reserving booths at the conference. They have an interview room where you can go apply for jobs. So we're trying to bring some of those folks into the panel just so that they can connect to audience members they've been talking to over the last 3-4 days. And we're also hoping to host a tutorial session for a half hour. We're talking to 2 partners, Amazon and NVIDIA, to see if they can, one of them can do something that's more of a hands-on, get some, maybe a small, short cloud computing workshop that will be about 30 minutes long on one of their platforms. That's our goal for SC19 this year. We're looking at expanding these 2 activities, the career panel and a workshop, to 2 other conferences later this year, HPC in December and then IPDPS early next year. We're hoping to bring both of these events to those 2 workshops. Again, please interrupt me if there are questions at any point. I'm happy to take them. Let me move on and talk a little bit about some of our other efforts right now. So we have 2 ongoing efforts. The first one is what I look at as best practice efforts. What we're trying to do right now is we've realized that there's an explosion of conferences that have doctoral symposiums or PhD forum in them. We're talking to organizers at 2 or 3 conferences right now, primarily SC, HPC, and IPDPS. Both SC and IPDPS have had long-running doctoral showcases. And what we're hoping to put together is a document that collects best practices, sources of funding that are available for travel awards, and a suggested timeline so that people who are organizing similar symposium at other conferences have a document or a guide that helps them get started and also helps them tap into sources of funding that are open to students. So that's one contribution we're working on for this year, putting together a document that we can share with organizers of other conferences. The other thing we're trying to do is, in addition to what I talked about before at IPDPS 2020, we're trying to organize a faculty workshop that targets early career faculty. And the goal here is to do this in partnership with the NSF and TCPP. And we're hoping to cover a number of NSF programs that target early career faculty, and also just broadly other sort of suggestions that are for programs that have a big educational component to them from the NSF. It so happens that the chair of TCHPC is at the NSF, so we're able to pull together a few people to organize this, and that's something we're hoping to do in May in 2020. So two sort of flavors of activities. We're going to do the doctoral showcase and do a career panel that targets the graduate students, and then we'll do an early faculty career panel, which will talk primarily around funding, but also a little bit of career growth, career advice for the first 6 years of a faculty career, just to share some advice with people who are more experienced. Again, this will involve a partnership with the NSF and with TCPP, and we're hoping to go through and organize a panel with about 5 to 6 people who can speak to different programs that the NSF funds. All right, what I'm most excited to show you in this call is share some educational resources. So IEEE TCPP has been very involved, and I want to share some links and actually walk you through some work that has been done in this area. So back in 2010, the NSF funded a little effort by TCPP to try to create some recommendations for curriculum guidelines that introduce parallelism early in undergraduate programs. And this was hosted first as a workshop by the NSF, and then there were some follow-on efforts. And they took out initial curriculum guidelines that have suggestions on what can be done. This is the kind of work that happens every 10 years in most curriculum writing organizations, where people get together, put out a curriculum, and sort of look forward and see what the next 10 years will in our field will look like, and what are the courses we should be covering, or what are the topics we should be covering in our courses. What's unique about this, though, is that this initiative, beyond just putting out a guideline for things you can do in your classroom, also created a community of people who were really experimenting with bringing high-performance computing early in computer science curriculum. They did this through creating 2 sort of programs. One of them was a series of workshops that have quite a lot of generous travel support. So faculty members who are trying new assignments or trying new pedagogical techniques can apply for some funding to carry this out, and then some funding to come attend the workshop and talk about this. So switching back to my slides for a second, the 3 main workshops they organized are EduPower at IPDPS, Edu HPC, that happens at Supercomputing, and then Edu Europar, which is fairly new but happens at Europar. So this initiative has an annual call for grants that funds small grants that allow you to experiment with pedagogical ideas in your classroom to bring high-performance computing to an undergraduate audience. And then they support faculty travel, presenting a paper or a poster at one of these workshops. I had a couple of grants under this program when I was a faculty member, and I highly recommend this for anyone who's looking for a small amount of money to try something new. We had an interesting program where we had 2 faculty members at 2 different institutions, sort of shadowing each other and also trying out different assignments for classes that were very similar at a similar audience. And it's a great way to collaborate with some of your colleagues in other institutions. This initiative, as I said, has grown a lot since the years. One thing we learned as we were bringing together people from many different institutions is that it's not always easy to teach high-performance computing, particularly if you're at a community college, at a small liberal arts college, you may not have the computing infrastructure you need. So as a result of this, there was an effort made through NSF and through Intel to create a cluster called the CDER cluster. I'll share these slides with you afterwards, and Steve can bounce them so you can access all these links. But the CDER cluster is really designed specifically for teaching parallel and distributed computing at any institution in the United States and outside the US too. And they also have a pretty well-maintained cluster. So the nice thing here is you don't have to perform any of the roles of a sysadmin. You just request for time and accounts on these machines, and everything is maintained for you. A couple of things I wanted to point out: in addition to compute nodes, so you can do traditional high-performance computing, there are also a pretty sizable number of GPU nodes available on this machine. So you can make use of these. These are all contributed by NVIDIA, and Intel contributed the other nodes. Like I said, this machine is constantly upgraded. It just went over some recent upgrades. And it's very easy to request an account. You just need to send a message to this email address here, put CDER in the subject line, and just send them usernames for your student accounts. students in your class, and they will create the cluster and share time and help you get started on the cluster. The cluster is being heavily used by people in many different institutions. It is a very nice resource. And again, it allows you to get up and running without much effort. I know as faculty members, we often wear many hats, and I think all of us can agree wearing the sysadmin hat may not be the most fun part of our jobs. So I'm just trying to promote this cluster a little bit. Again, instructors can request account for classes. Purpose is purely for teaching. So this is not a machine that is used for heavy workloads or a lot of computation. So your students should really see the effects of parallelism. It's designed to be a machine that's primarily used for teaching loads. So makes it easy to demo and teach a variety of different high performance computing technologies. The other piece I wanted to share is an effort to put together coursework in this area. So everything that was funded through this initiative led to the creation of some pretty interesting assignments and or slide decks and or course materials. And we were trying from very early on to have the authors of these materials contribute them as a larger resource to the community. So what I want to share with you is this portal that has links to course assignments. It actually is a very nice searchable portal that you can look for by specific categories of courses that you are looking for. So let me just make this a little larger. So again, you can search for specific things, either book articles, animations, hardware, software, posters, but really you can also organize this by courseware. So if I'm looking for how do people teach some parallelism in CS1 and CS2 classes, I can run a quick search on this and I'll come up with all kinds of articles. I can filter these by categories, but sometimes you'll notice these are just like little papers that explain assignment or something someone has done. Other times there'll be an entire zip of somebody's courseware where they've contributed. So here's an example where they've contributed all the code examples that they used to teach the particular course that's being searched for here. Again, a very nice resource from the community. You can contribute materials to this also. The licensing terms are all explained on the website, but it's fairly open and generous licenses. And again, a lot of different universities and different styles of institutions have contributed slides, programming assignments, sample code, sample solutions to these programming assignments, and even some autograders and other resources are available if you are looking for them. So please take a look at this. Very interesting to see what your colleagues at other institutions are doing too. That's everything I wanted to talk about for courseware. I'm going to change tracks now, but I want to pause at this point and see if there are any questions around any of the resources that I have shown so far.
So are there questions? You can either unmute and ask them verbally or put them in the chat window and I'll pass them on.
I have a question. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
I work in an institution that Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and we are undergraduate institution. We don't have a PhD program. So some of these grants for travel, they were very specific for PhD. We don't have that, but we do have very good master students.
Yeah.
Will they be able to apply for these grants or is?
No, you make a great point. So it really depends on the conference. If the conference is running a session that is more generally a student research session, then we will fund any awards for anybody who's accepted into the conference, and then they apply separately for funding. Unfortunately, at SC, it is a doctoral symposium, so it's only for PhD students, but there are probably some other conferences that we can look to support for anybody who's an undergraduate or a master's student to presenting some research they've worked on.
Okay.
I believe SC, just as an aside, I believe SC does have some travel grants for other students to the conference, and it's also possible for students to go as to be volunteers, so they have to put in some hours working at the conference, but the conference will then pay some of their expenses, so you could look into that as well.
Yeah, and SC also has an undergraduate research session that you can look at for students who go there.
Yeah. The problem with volunteering usually is that they put you in to work, and then it depends on the conference. That's true.
Sure.
Some of them is like basically you are the entire day working, and they only let you get in and see some of the presentation.
Yeah, I think at SC they give the students a fair amount of time to go to session.
Okay.
Might want to look into it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Earl Dodd posted a question in the chat. It says, I am from industry, not a vendor. As an HPC strategist and alchemist. How can industry, not a vendor like Intel or HPC, help with this effort?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I had a...
So he's from an industry, but not a computer vendor.
Right.
He wants to know how an organization like him could contribute to that kind of effort.
I think there are many ways, right? I can connect you to TCPP and see if there's any curriculum writing initiatives that we can do. I think industry has a good eye on how this technology is being used in the workplace, and we can look at making sure students have the skill set coming out of college that can be used in the industry. So I definitely encourage people to look at the kind of assignments that are being created and maybe contribute some assignments that you think will be suitable for this, for undergraduates who are graduating with some parallelism, some knowledge in parallelism. I also think industry in general can look at doing some small events to support students. So particularly putting together a consortium of people who can fund a couple of travel awards for undergraduates, maybe to go to a conference, maybe other outreach activities that fund the ability of faculty members to attend the conference who may not otherwise be able to do so. Just talk to me and I can connect you to the right people who work on this all the time.
Also, I might want to add that there are a number of programs that our organization, the SIG HPC Education, is in touch with, and those programs are looking for internships. And I think Earl just pointed to possibility of internships. So
right.
There are some available. I think both Akshay's organization and ours would be glad to promote those.
Yeah.
For students at every level, I think.
Yeah, and if you're looking to host a student, we're happy to connect you to institutions. Even if you have a certain profile in mind, we can reach out to members at those institutions to see if we can get you a student.
Other questions at this point? I guess not, actually. So why don't you go ahead?
I think there's one more on the chat.
No, it's the same guy. He just gave an email address.
Okay.
I'll try to save for you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's move on. Again, I encourage you to look at the cluster resources and the course curriculum resources, particularly if you're teaching a class. Look at something that may help you get ready for the fall for the class. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how we can collaborate together between SIG HPC and our organization, IEEE TC HPC. So hopefully everything I've shown you so far, I've kind of shared 2 or 3 umbrella activities. We support some graduate students, we support or target some programming that help faculty, and then we also have this whole initiative within the educational world to make course assignments, to make cluster time and other resources available. This is pretty common ground. We share a large number of our mission and objective statements. There's a lot of common language there. We probably also have common challenges. And I know in this area in particular, one of the biggest challenges is how do you get something visible to the right people? Because I firmly believe that a lot of the resources we need are out there. It's just a question of connecting the right people to the right resources, and that's a pretty challenging problem we face. What I wanted to think about is how can we conduct activities that either cross-program or cross-advertise our events so that we have a bigger impact. There are some challenges here. We do have slightly different focuses in terms of what conferences we target. But I think SC is the big one that is common to both organizations. It's probably a good starting point for exploring some synergy in our activities. Again, there are other conferences, but we can do variations of this and cross-advertise and cross-list our events. That in some ways that gives us greater coverage than we would as a single organization.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to talk about what our focus is for 2020. We're going to start making some progress on our other objectives, in particular connecting undergraduate and graduate students to internships, full-time positions, and REUs. So if you're hosting an REU site, or if you have students who are looking for an REU site or an internship, please stay on. I'll try to keep you abreast of this. If you're interested, please get my email, and I'm happy to put you on our mailing list so we can share some of these activities as we make progress on them. We're also looking to develop and advertise resources that benefit faculty teaching courses in high-performance computing. For this one, we're probably going to largely piggyback off the TCPP curriculum initiative that I showed you. There's a lot of interesting coursework that's already on that portal. And I think what we need to do is, instead of building yet another resource, we need to try to take advantage of the resources that already exist and maybe put more critical content on those platforms so that they're easily usable. We have this idea, I have this idea of trying to come up with a course that actually utilizes the cluster that I shared with you, where the course lives as a Jupyter notebook or completely online platform that has some embedded videos. So the idea is you could use it as an extra set of lab exercises for your students, and the entire lab is hosted on the cluster. So hopefully, if you're interested, we can try to see if there's some ability to put together a proposal that can fund the development of such a course that can run on the cluster and be used by several people. I think one problem with using a cluster is that we don't want each person utilizing this to recreate all the exercises and examples. If you have something that works really nicely inside a notebook with some videos and some self-guided exercises, this may be a really nice way to get some traction and some heavier usage on these machines. So in conclusion, I just wanted to share some upcoming activities for the IEEE TC-HPC Educational Outreach Program. I encourage you to attend our Birds of Feather session at SC if you're going to be at SD. Again, please utilize the cluster and the curriculum resources that I shared today. I'm open to having a discussion now on ideas for how we can work together to serve the community more broadly. At this point, I don't want to share more. I want to open this up to questions and or discussion. So please feel free to jump in.
Okay. So for the cluster, I have a class 30 students more or less. So will I be able to create 30 accounts or 15 if they work in pairs?
Any number should be fine. We have had classes that range from like a few dozen accounts to a few hundred accounts. So there's pretty much support for any size class on the cluster.
Is there any limitation to the memory we can use? Because some of the high performance computing problems, like doing small convolution problems and things like that, they don't require so much memory. But I was thinking also that students really like machine learning projects that are data science, however we want to call it. And do they require to upload a huge data set? And by huge, it's a couple of gigabytes, so it's not really outrageous, but will they be able to do it? Or?
In general, yes, but I always caution that by saying, one, I'm not the admin for the machine, and two, and the second thing I want to say is that it is a shared resource. So if as long as the usage is not impacting other people on the cluster who are also teaching classes, it shouldn't be a problem. We want the machine to be as heavily utilized as possible. So if they are working on personal projects, if it's out of like regular business hours, there should be no issues doing anything like that.
I understand. Yeah, and whatever we upload, then we take it back when we are done, right? So nothing is,
And once you request for accounts, there'll be a little more information shared on the guidelines for using the machine there.
Actually, I will use it. I will use this immediately for the fall.
That's great. I'm glad we could share something that was useful.
That it was a teaching cluster.
Plus, if you're looking for some, like, just to teach a short introduction to GPU programming, it's really easy to get machines that all your students will have access to common libraries without you having to set all that up.
Update the lab, which is always, every summer we start with a mess in the lab. Perfect.
Good, I'm glad that was useful.
Yeah, super useful.
So actually, let me say that from the point of view of the SIG HPC Education chapter, we're more than happy to cross-advertise our events on our website and through our email list. We also have a standing committee that's looking at curriculum materials, and although the particular focus is a little bit different in computational science, sort of broadly based rather than just parallel computing, I think that we'd like to share the material list that committee puts together with whatever your group does. Cross-reference that. I think that would be very useful as well.
Yeah. And just to be clear, the cluster and the curriculum website is hosted by TCPP, or came out of the work that TCPP did. It's one of our sister PCs. But again, I thought it would be the right resource to share with the audience on this webinar.
Earl just suggested we cross-advertise with the SIG HPC professionals. And I'll save that link for us both as well.
Okay.
Mm.
Are there any other questions or comments at this point?
Any suggestions on what we can be doing, since we're pretty new and we're open to listening to what the community needs are?
Well, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just have to say that I want to look at all the material and everything that you have put together and use it, and then I will have a better idea.
Okay.
It's definitely a great start. I don't know how to advertise it too. I will, by word of mouth, definitely I will tell my colleagues and in the university that actually are in computational. I am in computer science, but there is a huge need for cluster teaching in computational physics. So in the physics department, in the chemistry department.
Yeah.
So I will definitely share this. And
Yeah, please. And it's pretty easy. There's a self-service email. If you're right there, they'll follow up with anything you need and share more information with you. So it's a pretty automated process. It's very easy to get accounts on the machine.
yeah, definitely. Once I know more, if it's easy, if it's useful, if they require this, I will let you know. I have this contact somewhere.
Okay.
I will have the contact.
Okay.
All right, any other final thoughts? Well, if not, actually, let me thank you for providing this information. I think this is quite useful. And as said, this is recorded and will be put on our SIG HPC Education website within the next couple of days. So that'll include the links that Akshay has in the slides, as well as his contact information. So within a couple of days, if you look at the SIG HPC Education.acm.org website under events, past events, this material will be there along with the link to the YouTube video. So you'll have that information.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, so thank you again, and we look forward as an organization to continuing to work with you in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to give a webinar. And thank you everyone for attending.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.